evening. I had to delay re-recording this. It was interrupted by Morrison's wanting to deliver my groceries early, which I don't mind. They've just done it, so now I had to abandon the recording. So I didn't want any interruptions from the phone ringing again, so I pray it doesn't now. I'm going to continue with the Little Mermaid. This is part 3, which I'd already begun recording, so now I have to start all over again. I will read a few words from the ending of part 2, so you can maybe recall what was happening. And the old witch, she said, "You see, I have to mix in some of my own blood so that the drink will be as sharp as a double-edged sword." "But if you take away my voice," said the Little Mermaid, "what will I have left?" "Your lovely figure," said the witch, "your graceful movements and your expressive eyes. With those you can easily enchant a human heart. Well, where's your courage? Put out your little tongue and let me cut it off as my payment. Then you shall have your powerful potion." "So be it," said the Little Mermaid, and the witch placed her cauldron on the fire to brew the magic potion. "Cleanliness before everything," she said, as she scoured the vessel with a bundle of snakes she had tied together in a large knot. Then she pricked herself in the breast and let the black blood drop into the cauldron. The steam that rose created strange shapes, terrifying to behold. The witch kept tossing fresh things into the cauldron, and when the brew began to boil, it sounded like a crocodile weeping. At last the magic potion was ready, and it looked just like clear water. "There you go," said the witch, as she cut off the Little Mermaid's tongue. She was now dumb, and could neither speak nor sing. "If the polyps should seize you as you return through the wood," said the witch, "just throw a single drop of this potion on them, and their arms and fingers will be torn into 1,000 pieces." But the Little Mermaid had no need for that. The polyps shrank back in terror when they caught sight of the glittering potion that shone in her hand like a twinkling star. And so she passed quickly through the wood, the marsh, and the roaring whirlpools. The Little Mermaid could see her father's palace. The lights in the ballroom were out. Everyone was sure to be asleep by this time, but she did not dare to go in to see them, for now she was done and about to leave them forever. She felt as if her heart was going to break from grief. She stole into the garden, took one flower from the beds of each of her sisters, blew 1,000 kisses toward the palace, and then rose up through the dark blue waters. The sun had not yet risen when she caught sight of the prince's palace and climbed the beautiful marble steps. The moon was shining clear and bright. The Little Mermaid drank the sharp, burning potion, and it seemed as if a double-edged sword was passing through her delicate body. She fainted and fell down as if dead. The sun rose and, shining across the sea, woke her up. She felt a sharp pain, but there in front of her stood the handsome young prince. He fixed his coal black eyes on her so earnestly that she cast down her own and realized that her fishtail was gone, and that she had as pretty a pair of white legs any young girl could wish for, but she was quite naked, and so she wrapped herself in her long flowing hair. The prince asked who she was and how she had come there, and she could only gaze back at him sweetly and sadly with her deep blue eyes, for of course she could not speak. Then he took her by the hand and led her to the palace. Every step she took, as the witch had predicted, made her feet as if they were treading on sharp knives and needles, but she was willingly endured it. She walked as lightly as a bubble by the prince's side. The prince and all who saw her marvelled at the beauty of her graceful movements. She was given costly dresses of silk and muslin after she arrived. She was the most beautiful creature in the palace, but she was dumb and could neither speak nor sing. Beautiful slave girls dressed in silk and gold came out and danced before the prince and his royal parents. One sang more beautifully than all the others, and the prince clapped his hands and smiled at her. This saddened the little mermaid, for she knew that she herself could sing far more beautifully, and she thought, "Oh, if only he knew that I gave my voice away in order to be with him." The slave girls then danced a graceful gliding dance to the most enchanting music, and the little mermaid raised her lovely white arms, stood on the tips of her toes, and glided across the floor, dancing as no one had danced before. She looked more and more lovely with every step, and her eyes appealed more deeply to the heart than did the singing of the slave girls. Everyone was enchanted, especially the prince, who called her his little foundling. She kept on dancing, even though it felt as if she were treading on sharp knives every time her foot touched the ground. The prince said that she must never leave him, and she was given permission to sleep outside his door on a velvet cushion. The prince had a page's costume made for her so that she could go riding with him on horseback. They rode together through the sweet-scented woods, where the green boughs grazed her shoulders and the little birds sang among the cool leaves. She climbed with the prince to the tops of high mountains, and although her tender feet bled, and everyone could see the blood, she only laughed and followed the prince until they could see the clouds beneath them that looked like a flock of birds travelling to distant lands. Back at the prince's palace, when everyone in the household was asleep, she would go out on the broad marble steps and cool her burning feet in the cold sea water. And then she would think of those down there in the depths of the sea. One night, her sisters rose up arm in arm, singing mournfully as they floated on the water. She beckoned to them, and they recognized her and told her how unhappy she had made them all. After that, they used to visit her every night And once she saw in the distance her old grandmother, who had not been to the surface of the sea for many years, and also the old sea king with his crown on his head. They both stretched out their hands towards her, but they did not venture so near to the shore as her sisters. With time, she became more precious to the prince. He loved her as one loves a little child, but it never occurred to him to make her his queen, and yet she had to become his wife, or else she would never receive an immortal soul, and on his wedding morning she would dissolve into foam on the sea. "Do you like me best of all?" the mermaid's eyes seemed to say, when he took her in his arms and kissed her lovely brow. "Yes, you are very precious to me," said the prince, "for you have the kindest heart of anyone, and you are more devoted to me than anyone else. You remind me of a young girl I once met, but shall probably never see again. I was in a shipwreck, and the waves cast me ashore near a holy temple, where several young girls were performing their duties. The youngest of them found me on the beach and saved my life. I saw her just twice. She is the only one in the world whom I could ever love. But you are so like her that you've almost driven her image out of my mind. She belongs to the holy temple, and my good fortune has sent you to me. We will never part." Ah, little does he know that it was I who saved his life, thought the little mermaid. I carried him across the sea to the temple in the woods, and I waited in the foam for someone to come and help. I saw the pretty girl that he loves better than he loves me, and the mermaid sighed deeply, for she did not know how to shed tears. He says the girl belongs to the holy temple, and that she will therefore never return to the world. They will never again meet. I am by his side, and I see him every day. I will take care of him and love him, and give up my life for him. Not long after that, there was talk that the prince would marry, and that the beautiful daughter of a neighbouring king would be his wife. And that was why he was rigging out such a splendid ship. The prince was going to pay a visit at a neighbouring kingdom. That was how they put it, meaning that he was going to look at his neighbour's daughter. He had a large entourage, but the little mermaid shook her head and laughed. She knew the prince's thoughts far better than anyone else. "I shall have to go," told her. "I have to visit this beautiful princess because my parents insist upon it. But they cannot force me to bring her back here as my wife. I could never love her. She is not at all like the beautiful girl in the temple whom you resemble. If I were forced to choose a bride, I would rather choose you, my dear mute foundling with the expressive eyes." And he kissed her rosy mouth, played with her long hair, and laid his head against her heart so that it dreamed of human happiness and an immortal soul. "You are not afraid of the sea, are you, my dear mute girl?" he asked as they stood on the deck of the splendid ship that was carrying them to the neighbouring kingdom. And he told her of powerful storms and dead calms, of the strange fishes in the deep, and what divers had seen down there. She smiled at his tales, for she knew better than anyone else about the wonders at the bottom of the sea. At night, when there was an unclouded moon, and everyone was asleep but the helmsman at his wheel, the little mermaid sat by the ship's rail, gazing down through the clear water. She thought she could see her father's palace, with her old grandmother standing on top of it, with the silver crown on her head, gazing through the swift current at the keel of the vessel. Then her sisters came up on the waves and looked at her with eyes full of sorrow, wringing their white hands. She beckoned to them and smiled, and would have liked to tell them that she was happy and that all was going well for her. But the cabin boy came up just then, and the sisters dug down so that the boy was sure that the white something he had seen was only foam on the water. The next morning, the ship sailed into the harbour of neighbouring king's magnificent capital. The church bells were ringing, and from the towers you could hear a flourish of trumpets. Soldiers saluted with gleaming bayonets and flying colours. Every day there was a festival. Balls and entertainment followed one another, but the princess had not yet appeared. People said that she was being brought up and educated in a holy temple, where she was learning all the royal virtues. At last she arrived. The little mermaid was eager for a glimpse of her beauty, and she had to admit that she had never seen a more charming person. Her skin was clear and delicate, and behind long dark eyelashes her laughing blue eyes shone with deep sincerity. "It's you," said the prince. "You are the one who rescued me when I was lying half dead on the beach." And he clasped his blushing bride in his arms. "Oh, I'm so very happy," he said to the little mermaid. "My dearest wish, more than I've ever dared hope for, has been granted. My happiness will give you pleasure because you are more devoted to me than anyone else." The little mermaid kissed his hand, and she felt as if her heart were already broken. The day of his wedding would mean her death, and she would turn into foam on the ocean waves. All the church bells were ringing as the heralds rode through the streets to proclaim the betrothal. Perfumed oil was burning in precious silver lamps on every altar. The priest swung the censers while the bride and bridegroom joined hands and received the blessing of the bishop. Dressed in silk and gold, the little mermaid stood holding the bride's train. But her ears never heard the festive music, and her eyes never saw the holy rites. She was thinking about her last night on earth and about everything that she had lost in this world. That same evening, bride and bridegroom went on board ship. The cannon roared, the flags were waving, and in the centre of the ship a sumptuous tent of purple and gold had been raised. It was strewn with luxurious cushions, for the wedded couple were to sleep there on that calm, cool night. The sails filled with the breeze, and the ship glided lightly and smoothly over the clear seas. When it grew dark, coloured lanterns were lit, and sailors danced merrily on deck. The little mermaid could not help thinking of that first time she had come up from the sea and gazed on just such a scene of joyous festivities. And now she joined in the dance, swerving and swooping as lightly as a swallow that avoids pursuits, Cries of admiration greeted her from all sides. Never before had she danced so elegantly. It was as if sharp knives were cutting into her delicate feet, but she felt nothing, for the wound in her heart was far more painful. She knew that this was the last night she would ever see the prince for whom she had forsaken her family and her home, given up her lovely voice, and suffered hours of agony without his suspecting a thing. This was the last evening that she would breathe the air with him, or gaze on the deep sea and starry night. An eternal night, without thoughts or dreams, awaited her who had no soul and would never win one. All was joy and merriment on board until long past midnight. She laughed and danced with the others, while the thought of death was in her heart. The prince kissed his lovely bride, while she played with his dark hair, and arm in arm they retired to the magnificent tent. The ship was now hushed and quiet. Only the helmsman was there at his wheel, and the little mermaid leaned with her white arms on the rail and looked to the east for a sign of the rosy dawn. The first ray of the sun, she knew, would bring her death. Suddenly she saw her sisters rising out of the sea. They were as pale as she, but their long, beautiful hair was no longer waving in the wind. It had been cut off. "We have given our hair to the witch," they said, "to help us save you from the death that awaits you tonight. She has given us a knife. Look, here it is. See how sharp it is. Before sunrise, you must plunge it into the prince's heart. Then when his warm blood splashes on your feet, they will grow back together and form a fish tail, and you will be a mermaid once more. You will be able to come back down to us in the water and to live out your 300 years before being changed into the foam of the salty sea. Make haste. Either he or you will die before sunrise. Our old grandmother has been feeling such sorrow that her white hair has been falling out, as ours fell under the witch's scissors. Kill the prince and come back to us, but make haste. Look at the red streaks in the sky. In a few minutes the sun will rise, and then you will die." With a strange deep sigh, they sank down beneath the waves. The little mermaid drew back the purple curtain of the tent, and she saw the lovely bride sleeping with her head on the prince's breast. She bent down and kissed his handsome brow, then looked at the sky, where the rosy dawn was growing brighter and brighter. She gazed at the sharp knife in her hand, and again fixed her eyes on the prince, who whispered the name of his bride in his dream. She alone was in his thoughts. The little mermaid's hand trembled as she held the knife. Then she flung it far out over the waves. The water turned red where it fell. Something that looked like drops of blood came oozing out of the water. With a last glance at the prince from the eyes half dimmed in death, she threw herself from the ship into the sea and felt her body dissolve into foam. And now the sun came rising up from the sea. Its warm and gentle rays fell on the death-chilled foam. But the little mermaid, did not feel as if she were dying. She saw the bright sun, and hovering around her, hundreds of lovely creatures. She could see right through them, see the white sails of the ship, and the rosy clouds in the sky, and their voice was the voice of song, yet too ethereal to be heard by mortal ears. Just no mortal eye could behold them. They had no wings, but their lightness bore them up as they floated through the air. The little mermaid saw that she had a body like theirs, and that she was rising higher and higher out of the foam. "Where am I?" she asked, and her voice sounded like that of the other beings, more ethereal than any earthly music could sound. "Among the daughters of the air," answered the others. "A mermaid does not have an immortal soul, and she can never have one unless she wins the love of a human being. Eternity for her depends on a power outside her, nor do the daughters of the air have an everlasting soul, but through good deeds they can earn one for themselves. We shall fly to the hot countries where the stifling air of pestilence means death for humans. We shall bring cool breezes, we shall carry the fragrance of flowers through the air, and send comfort and healing. When we have tried to do all the good we can, in 300 years we shall win an immortal soul and have a share in mankind's eternal happiness. You poor little mermaid have tried with your whole heart to do as we are doing. You have suffered and endured, and have raised yourself into the world of the spirits of the air. Now, with 300 years of good deeds, you too can earn for yourself an immortal soul." The little mermaid raised her crystal arms towards God's Son, and for the first time she knew what tears felt like. On the ship there was much bustling about and sounds of life. The little mermaid saw the prince and his beautiful bride searching for her. With great sadness they gazed at the pearly foam, as if they knew that she had thrown herself onto the waves. Unseen, she kissed the forehead of the bride, smiled at the prince, and then mounted onto a rose-red cloud that was sailing to the sky with the other children of the air. "So we shall float for 300 years, until at last we arrive at the heavenly kingdom, and we may reach it even sooner," whispered one of her companions. "Unseen, we float into human homes where there are children, and for every day we find a good child who makes mother and father happy and earns their love. God shortens our time of trial. The child never knows about that when we fly through the room and smile with joy, and then a year is taken away from the 300. But when we see a child who is naughty or spiteful, then we shed tears of sorrow, and every tear adds one more day to our time of trial." This is the end. The conclusion adds a disciplinary twist to the tale, suggesting to the children outside the book that an invisible presence monitors their behavior. The lesson can be far more frightening than the descriptions of the tortures to which the little mermaid is subjected. That is the end of that lovely story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Good night, and God bless you all. There'll be another story another time. Bye-bye.